Hey, and welcome to the Ambitious Bookkeeper Podcast. I'm Serena Shoup, CPA, a mom of three, and I've been running a virtual bookkeeping business from my home since 2017. You are in the right place if you are a bookkeeper, accountant, or an accounting student, and you believe and know in your heart that your purpose is bigger than sitting in a cubicle. If you're ready to learn some actionable tips and strategies for starting and growing your accounting business, then I hope you stick around. Hello. Welcome to our June live Q&A. So yeah, I will get started. Whatever you have questions about, whether it's mindset, whether it's client communication, pricing, services, anything is on the table. I did get a question the other day about cybersecurity and file management / backing up files. So we do have an older podcast episode that I did way towards the beginning of the podcast with Jock Walls, where we did talk about insurance and cybersecurity and cyber insurance and things like that. I always recommend once you get your first client, you sign up for cyber insurance and professional liability insurance. You don't need it until you have your first client. So it's a good idea to at least get quotes before you sign that first client, and then pull the trigger on your insurance when you do land that first client. The other recommendation I have is to actually be aware of the scams and things that are happening and take webinars and all that kind of stuff on cybersecurity. Generally, your cyber insurance will host classes on this. And if you have a team, it's very imperative that your team also take these trainings and understand phishing scams and things like that, because scammers are getting really, really sophisticated. And I have multiple stories of people that have gotten scammed, just especially if you manage payables for clients, being very, very skeptical and thorough when you're getting emails requesting money or changing bank account information, things like that, because that's how they get you. As far as backing up files, we pay for an additional service that is included in our pricing and packaging for clients. All of our clients, once we sign them on, we sign up for this service called Export My Data, which links to Xero. There's other services that link to QuickBooks, and we actually have backups run through that service every week. That is because Xero doesn't actually, and QuickBooks doesn't either, they don't actually do backups of your data if you need to rewind something. So I layer that added security in, and it's a cost of doing business. It's like $10 per client, I think, for the Xero version and the program that we're using, but it just runs in the background once we link our clients to it. So if ever needed, we can pull a backup. Yes, you can do those things manually. You could manually back up all of your clients' data, even on the cloud if you wanted to, but who has time for that? That's my little spiel on cybersecurity and data. As far as file sharing, make sure you're using something like the business version of Google Drive, and make sure that whatever services you're using, they have SOC 1 and SOC 2 reports. And that, I believe I have a podcast episode about that from early on, or at least a blog. So, all right, questions in the chat. Yay. I will be starting a new client in the next couple of weeks. They have paychecks and run Toast. How should I handle these clients and receiving the reports for these, or do they merge to QuickBooks? I know Paychecks does sync with QuickBooks. You will have to request that the client add you as an accountant so that you can manage the integration. And then I'm not sure on Toast. I've never handled that. If anyone else has handled that, please chime in the chat. Also, you feel free to post in the Facebook group to see if anyone else has experience with that. Also, a quick Google search with looking on the Toast website with their support documentation of if they have an integration with QuickBooks is a good idea. I'm a firm believer of understanding how the integration is supposed to work before actually connecting it, because if it's going to feed every single transaction over to QuickBooks, I don't recommend connecting an integration. If it's feeding over maybe the daily receipts or the lump sum deposits or something, that's one thing. But when it starts doing every single transaction, it can become quite a mess. So that's my recommendation on that. Michelle says, have you used the new QuickBooks Ledger plan? What can you tell us about it? What does it does and doesn't do? How best to use it? I have not used it. I only have one client on QuickBooks. It's not on the Ledger plan. But if it's anything like the Ledger plan for Xero, it's typically used as, and don't quote me on this because I haven't gone through any training for the QuickBooks Ledger plan, but if it's anything like the Xero one, it's really intended to be used as a write-up service, like a maybe year-end or month-end, where you're just doing like a one-time entering all the transactions after the fact and not matching receipts and things like that. Sometimes they connect with bank feeds. I'm not sure if that one does, but I would go through the QuickBooks training on the Ledger plan to see how it's intended to use. That's always my recommendation for software. Don't rely necessarily on other third-party courses that show you how to do stuff, because for all of your training, at least, I would still start with the help documentation and the training provided by the software provider to see how it's intended to use it, and then tweak it for your industries or your process or whatever. Because those programs change so often now with cloud software that when someone creates a program about how to use a software, like by the time it launches, it's usually a little bit obsolete, or there's changes to the interface or functionality. And so the best place to start is always with that actual software provider and their trainings. Yeah. Yes, Yesenia, that would be my recommendation, is doing a monthly report and then doing a journal entry every month for point of sale stuff. If you're not sure on how the integration works or you don't want to mess with it getting messy, we do that with a couple of clients in Shopify, ones that have like minimal transactions and we don't really need to pay for an integration. So yeah, that's always a good option, especially if the client's not looking at their books every week to see where things stand. Most of the time, clients, they're looking at their point of sale and they already understand their revenue on a weekly basis or even a daily basis from that software. I don't really think it's very crucial to have all of that stuff imported real time into QuickBooks or Xero, or your accounting software, rather. Let me know in the chat how your summer's going, how you're balancing. If you have kids at home, I've been doing a lot of minimal meetings, like maybe a couple hours of work in the morning and then taking the afternoons to play with my kids and then working again in the evening when they go to sleep. That's what works for me. I feel like summer overall is just like way more laid back, and hopefully you guys are finding some time to like relax and take it easy. Now that tax deadline is passed, we do have a September one coming up for anyone that did extensions for S corporations and things like that, partnerships. And then the October one, we still have a couple clients that we onboarded after the tax deadline who had filed extensions. And so we are still doing some 2023 stuff and getting all that squared away. This is a really good time to market those types of services for people that like filed an extension and then just kind of like forgot about it, letting them know that like now's the time to sign up and sign on and get everything situated before Q3 and all that good stuff. Michelle said, I am semi-retired and just starting up a small bookkeeping practice. I am not particularly interested in growing a large practice. None of the trainings, podcasts, etc. that I've watched do not address how to run a small practice. I'm wondering how to set up a practice with minimal bells and whistles, but still have the necessary protections like insurance, etc. that won't cost me more than the income I will generate. Yeah, Michelle, I don't know if you've gone through the Bookkeeping Biz workshops yet. I'm going to be hosting them again at the end of August, and I go through all of that, how to set things up with minimal investment, all the softwares that I used at the very beginning. And I have a small practice too. There is a lot out there about like running a large firm or whatever. And I do still call my practice a firm, but it is small. Like we have fewer than 20 clients. So it's still a small firm. I still use a lot of the systems that I used from the very beginning. We're just now starting to outgrow a couple of things. So definitely check out the workshops. In the meantime, I have a checklist that you can go through that's free. If you could just go to ambitiousbookkeeper.com/checklist, you can download it and it gets you started with all of those things as well. So yeah, definitely check those resources out. Jordan says, I have a client who's always months behind in providing answers to ask my account questions or transactions. this is normal with him, but I need to inform him it will be a catch up at that point and not month to month. We don't have a signed engagement letter because I started doing his books for him prior to starting my business. This client is a family member. How do I approach this when I've done it in the past as month to month fee instead of a catch up? So, Jordan, my question for you is, what's the price difference between a catch up and month to month? Because typically the way that we structure our engagements is if they are signed on as a monthly client, even if they're not providing the information monthly, they're still paying for the monthly service and the monthly reports. And if we can't deliver the monthly reports because they haven't provided answers, then they're kind of missing out and they're just paying extra. And our catch-ups are actually less expensive because it's just like a one-time thing, right? So I would consider like maybe thinking about the way you're structuring the pricing. And then also what we typically do when people don't answer their Ask My Accountant transactions is we still run their reports and then we point out, this is how much is in this bucket. And so your reports aren't really valuable until you answer these questions. And we just continue to remind them every month, month after month. And then at the end of the year, if it's all piled up, then that's usually when they go through it. And then they're like, oh my gosh, this was so crappy. I should have been doing this all year. So that's one way that you could approach it and just continue to charge them month to month. Maybe increase the fee a little bit. If you want to keep them on as a client, I would just seriously have a heart to heart with them as a family member. Like I've had this situation with a friend who I did bookkeeping for, and she was paying me, but she was doing the same kind of thing. And so I was like, look, dude, I want to be able to provide you really good service, but it's hard because you're not answering the questions. And then my service isn't as valuable. So like either maybe get on board with this, or it might be time to find a different bookkeeper or whatever. So that would be a way to approach it too. It is a little bit, it's hard because typically it sounds like the family, like when you engage with a family member like this, it's like it was at the beginning, they're kind of like helping you out, starting your business, but then they just become kind of burdensome and they don't really treat it like a business relationship because they know you. And so that's one of the reasons why I don't prefer to do business with friends and family anymore, because it makes it really difficult to have that conversation. But you could come back and say, hey, like so-and-so, I've super appreciated being able to do your bookkeeping, having you help me get my business off the ground. I really appreciate it. I'm implementing some policies and procedures just as I grow, and I want to make sure that all my clients are treated the same. And I'm going to have you sign an engagement letter to keep everything like above board. And this is my request for getting answers back to us. And this is the price. And are you okay with it? Or would you like help finding a new bookkeeper type of situation? Unfortunately, like doing business, you're not going to get around having difficult conversations. So the sooner you rip off that Band-Aid, the better, but you don't have to like go into that type of a conversation not prepared. I would write down kind of how you want to structure the conversation, do some bullet points, do some meditation or whatever, like whatever you have to do. It's still going to be uncomfortable, but you don't have to like just go in blindly. You can actually prepare for a conversation like that, and it'll be a good learning experience. So, oh, it's a brother. Awesome. Yeah, I don't know how close you are or whatever, but and then it's also one of those things like how if you feel like it would damage your relationship with your brother, like is it worth making a stink about it or whatever? It might be worth to just be like, hey bro, like I think because like we have a hard time with like the month to month communication and I'm not getting the information I need, I'm going to move you to an annual engagement and this is going to be what I charge for that. And then you don't have to worry about questions throughout the year, but just a heads up, it's going to be probably a lot at the end of the year for you to ask a bunch of questions. So you could either answer them every month or every quarter, or you could wait until the end of the year and be stressed about it. So that's how I would approach it with my brother anyways. How do I clean up 2 transactions in QuickBooks from 3 years ago sitting in the bank rec without messing up closed out year's books? This might be one of the pitfalls of QuickBooks is when you void something, I don't know if it voids it on today's date or if it backdates it to like the original transaction. So what I would do is I would actually create a journal entry to basically reverse that transaction. So drill into those transactions and do a screenshot of them or whatever to keep as your proof. And instead of coding your journal entry to reverse out whatever expense it was or whatever, unless it was a balance sheet account, if those checks are coded to balance sheet accounts, then you can reverse out they were owner's contributions. So then I would just do a journal entry to debit cash to reverse that and credit owner contributions. That should be the correct thing. And then on the current bank reconciliation, check them both off. They should wash each other out. And then you've cleared them both, if that makes sense. So yeah, one side of the journal entry will be that checking account or bank account. And then the other side will be whatever the transaction was for as well. And then on the description, I would just say to void XYZ transaction and clear it off. If it were an expense account or a revenue account that's still outstanding from prior years, you would want to adjust that to retained earnings. And that would be like a prior period adjustment. When you are done with a year in QBO, do you do anything to close that year? Yes, I lock it so no one can put any transactions to it. We actually lock periods after we've completed month end as well, just to make sure nothing ever gets posted to prior months. Unless we know it's going to happen, then we have to like intentionally unlock the period and post it. To lock a period in QuickBooks, you go to Account Settings, Advanced, I believe. And then there should be a section to lock period. And we always put a password on it so that our clients can't post anything to prior periods unless they know the password. In Xero, you can't password protect it, but in QuickBooks, you can. It's a good practice to get into. That's part of our month-end checklist, that we lock the period. That way nothing gets posted accidentally, because it's really easy to like enter an invoice to a prior period, especially if you're like using HubDoc or Dext and it just automatically pulls the invoice date. If it pulls a prior year, it'll post it and you won't really realize it until after the fact. And there's really not much worse as a tax preparer when you like get the trial balance for the new year and prior year balances have changed from when you closed things out last year. So yeah, definitely recommend incorporating that into your processes. If anyone is planning on being at XeroCon, please let me know. I would love to meet you there. It's in Nashville this year. I think there's still tickets if you want to get one. I'm bringing my whole entire team. So if you want to meet everybody behind the brand, we'll try to do some sort of a meetup or something. We're kicking off the bookkeeping biz workshops at the end of August. So if you have a friend that has been asking you about starting a bookkeeping business, or maybe you are the friend that's trying to start the bookkeeping business, I highly encourage you to join that. What do I do if I can't find the matches for the other Gusto journal entries? Okay, so there are entries that are posted in QuickBooks. Go into Gusto to look at the history to make sure that those are valid. And if you still can't find anything, I would make sure none of those are duplicated from the integration. If you can, use a little search function to search that amount to see if anything else with that amount pops up. And if you still can't find a match into the bank statement for those Gusto transactions, I would consider, you would have to make sure that they're not duplicates before you just remove them. But I would drill into the transactions in Gusto to see what they were and if they were supposed to even have been imported. Sometimes they're not. So yeah, I can't really say for sure without like going through the transactions with you, but hopefully you can find a match. And if not, then you may have to avoid them, but I would be weary of giving you that advice without really verifying that they're not duplicated. Yeah. One last question. Do you know anyone that is familiar with the integration between Square and QBO? Everyone says to unlink and do a JE, but I want to try to continue with what they have set up. You can, if you're in the Ambitious Bookkeeper Facebook group, I would post in there because there's probably someone in there. I think back in the day, I had a client that had Square connected. So you just want to make sure that you, again, go through the help documentation for the Square integration and make sure it's set up correctly. Make sure it's mapped correctly to the right accounts in QBO. I would start with that. I don't know what your struggle is with it, if you're already having issues with things matching or whatnot, but I would start with that. Alrighty, everyone. Thank you so much. Oh, it's a mess. Yeah, then I would probably unlink it and do a journal entry as well and like remove all the transactions that fed in through Square. All right. I'm going to close it down. I hope you all have a wonderful July. Everyone have a great summer. Bye. Thank you to everyone who helps make this podcast possible. Content and interviews are produced by me, Serena Shu. Our intro and outro music is written and performed by my brother, Ian Gilliam. Editing is also by Ian using his awesome sound engineering skills along with Descript software. Hosting and publishing is by Buzzsprout. And you can check out the show notes for links to all of these amazing resources and resources mentioned in the episode.
Be ambitious.